Hello, lovely people. So we're on chapter 8 of Max Heindel's Rosicrucian Cosmo Conception, the work of evolution. Ariadne's thread. Having become acquainted with the worlds, the globes and the revolutions which constitute the path of evolution during the 7 periods, we are now in a position to consider the work which is done in each period, as well as the methods employed to accomplish it. The Ariadne's thread, which will guide us through the maze of globes, worlds, revolutions and periods, will be found when it's remembered and kept steadily in mind that the virgin spirits, which constitute the evolving life wave, became entirely unconscious when they commenced their evolutionary pilgrimage through the 5 worlds of substance, denser than the world of virgin spirits. The purpose of evolution is to make them fully conscious and able to master the matter of all worlds. Therefore, the conditions embodied in globes, worlds, revolutions and periods are ordered with that end in view. During the Saturn, Sun and Moon periods and the past half of the present Earth period, the virgin spirits have unconsciously built their different vehicles under the direction of exalted beings who guided their progress, and have gradually awakened until they have attained the present state of waking consciousness. This period is called involution. From the present time to the end of the Vulcan period, the virgin spirits, who are now our humanity, will perfect their vehicles and expand their consciousness in the 5 worlds by their own efforts and genius. This period is called evolution. A thorough comprehension of the scheme of planetary evolution, which has been outlined in the preceding pages, is of immense value to the student. Although some believers in the law of consequence and rebirth seem to think that the possession of such knowledge is quite non-essential and of little use, it is nevertheless of very great importance to the earnest student of these 2 laws. It trains the mind in abstract thought and elevates it above the sordid things of concrete existence, helping the imagination to soar beyond the hampering toils of self-interest. As stated in our study of the desire world, interest is the mainspring to action. Yet, at our present stage of progress, interest is generally aroused by selfishness. It's sometimes of a very subtle nature, but it spurs to action of various kinds. All action, inspired by interest, generates certain effects which act on us, and in consequence we are bound by action having to do with the concrete worlds. But if our minds are occupied with such subjects as mathematics or the study of planetary phases of evolution, we are in the region of purely abstract thought, beyond the influence of feeling, and the mind is directed upwards towards the spiritual realism and liberation. When we are extracting cube root or multiplying figures or thinking of periods and revolutions, etc., we have no feeling about it. We do not quarrel about twice 2 being 4. If our feelings were involved, we should perhaps try to make it 5 and quarrel with the one who, for personal reasons, said it was but 3. But in mathematics, truth is most clearly apparent and feeling is eliminated. Not my experience at primary school. Therefore, to the average man, desiring to live in the feelings, mathematics is dry and uninteresting. Pythagoras taught his pupils to live in the world of eternal spirit, and he demanded that those who desired instruction from him should first study mathematics. A mind capable of understanding mathematics is above the average and is capable of rising into the world of spirit, because it's not fettered in the world of feeling or desire. The more we accustom ourselves to think in terms of the spiritual worlds, the better we shall be able to rise above the illusions which surround us in this concrete existence, where the twin feelings of interest and indifference obscure the truth and bias us, as the reflection of the light rays through the Earth's atmosphere gives us incorrect ideas of the position of the luminary emitting them. Therefore, the student who wishes to know the truth, to enter and investigate the realms of spirit, to free himself from the toils of the flesh, as rapidly as is consistent with safety and proper growth, is earnestly advised to study what follows as thoroughly as possible, to assimilate it and draw mental conceptions of these worlds, globes and periods. If he wishes to progress in this way, the study of mathematics and of Hinton's The Fourth Dimension are also admirable exercises in abstract thought. This work of Hinton's, though basically incorrect because the four-dimensional desire world cannot be actually found by three-dimensional methods, has opened the eyes of several persons who have studied it and made them clairvoyant. Moreover, remembering that logic is the best teacher in any world, it's certain that the individual who succeeds in entering into the superphysical world by means of such studies in abstract thought will not become confused, but will be able to give a good account of himself under all circumstances. A stupendous scheme is here unfolded, and as more and more detail is filled in, its complexity becomes almost inconceivable. Anyone capable of comprehending it will be well rewarded for taking the utmost pains to do so. Therefore, the students should read slowly, repeat often, think deeply and much. This book, particularly this chapter, cannot be read in a casual manner. Every sentence has weight and bearing upon what follows, and presupposes a knowledge of what precedes it. If the book is not studied thoroughly and systematically, it will grow more and more incomprehensible and confusing with every page. On the other hand, if it's studied and well thought out as the student proceeds, it will be found that each page is illuminated by the increased knowledge gained by study of what went before. No work of this kind, dealing with the deepest phases of the great world mystery that human mind, at its present stage of development, is capable of grasping, can now be written in such a manner that it will be light reading. Yet, the deepest phases now comprehensible to us, are the ABC of the scheme, as it will be revealed to us when our minds have become capable of understanding more, in later stages of our development as supermen. The Saturn period. The globes of the Saturn period consisted of much rarer and finer substances than our Earth, as will be evident from a study of Diagram 7 and Diagram 8, which the student is advised to keep close at hand for frequent reference while studying this subject. The densest globe of that period was located in the same portion of the world of thought occupied by the rarest of globes of the present period, the region of concrete thought. These globes had no consistency such as we can sense. Warmth is the only word that approximates the idea of the Saturn period. It was dark, and if a person could have entered into the space it occupied, he would have felt and seen nothing. All about him would have been darkness, but he would have felt its warmth. To the materialist, it will of course seem insanity to such a condition. To the materialist, it will of course seem insanity to call such a condition a globe, and to assert that it was the field of evolution of form and life. Yet, when we consider the nebula theory, we can realize that the nebula must have been dark before it glowed with light, and that it must have been hot before it became fiery. This heat must have been brought about by motion, and motion is life. We may say that the virgin spirits who were to evolve consciousness and form were embedded in this globe, or perhaps better, that the whole globe was composed of virgin spirits, as a raspberry is made of a great number of small raspberries. They were incorporated in the globe as the life ensouling the mineral is in our earth. Therefore, it's said among occult scientists that in the Saturn period, man went through the mineral stage. Outside this warmth globe, in its atmosphere, we might say were the great creative hierarchies who were to help the evolving virgin spirits to develop form and consciousness. There were many hierarchies, but for the present we shall concern ourselves with the principal ones only, those which did the most important work of the Saturn period. In the Rosicrucian terminology, these are called Lords of the Flame, because of their brilliant luminosity of their bodies and their great spiritual powers. They are called thrones in the Bible and worked on man of their own free will. They were so far advanced that this evolutionary manifestation could give them no new experiences and therefore no added wisdom. And the same may be said of two still higher order of hierarchies, to be named later. The rest of the creative hierarchies, in order to complete their own evolutions, were compelled to work on, in, and with man. These Lords of the Flame were outside the dark Saturn globe, and their bodies emitted a strong light. They, so to say, projected their pictures upon the surface of that ancient Saturn globe, which was so impressionable that it reflected in a multiple or echo-like manner everything that came in contact with it, giving back the images manifolded. This is told in the Greek myth, wherein it said that Saturn destroyed his children. However, by repeated efforts during the first revolution, the Lords of the Flame succeeded in implanting in the evolving life the germ which has developed our present dense body. This germ was somewhat developed during the remainder of the first 6 revolutions, being given the capacity for developing the sense organs, particularly the ear. Therefore, the ear is the most highly developed organ we possess. It's the instrument which carries with the greatest accuracy the impressions of outside conditions to the consciousness. It's less subject to the illusions of the physical world than the other sense organs. The consciousness of the evolving life of that period was like that of the mineral of today, a state of unconsciousness similar to that attained by mediums in the deepest trance. Yet, during the first 6 revolutions, the evolving life worked on the germ of the dense body under the direction and with the help of the different creative hierarchies. In the middle of the 7th revolution, the Lords of the Flame, who had been inactive since they gave the germ of the dense body in the first revolution, again became active, this time to awaken the highest spiritual principle. They aroused the initial activity of the divine spirit in man. Thus, man owes his highest and lowest vehicles, the divine spirit and the dense body, to the evolution of the Saturn period. These, the Lords of the Flame, of their own free will, helped him to manifest, not being under the slightest compulsion to do so. The work of the various creative hierarchies is not started on Globe A at the commencement of a period or a revolution. It commences in the middle of one revolution, growing in strength and reaching its highest efficiency in the middle of the cosmic night, which is between revolutions as well as between periods. Then it gradually declines as the life wave sweeps on to the middle of the next revolution. Thus, the work of the Lords of the Flame in awakening the germinal consciousness was most active and efficient during the rest period between the Saturn and the Sun periods. We reiterate that a cosmic night is not to be regarded as a time of inactivity. It's not inert existence, as we saw in the case of the individual passing from death to a new birth. So with the great death of all the globes of a period, it is a cessation of active manifestation that a proportionately keener subjective activity may be unfolded. Perhaps the best idea of the nature of this subjective activity may be gained by observing what happens when a ripe fruit is buried in the ground. Fermentation and decay of the flesh sets in. But out of that chaos comes the new plant, sprouting forth into the air and sunshine. So when a period is past, all is resolved into conglomerate chaos, apparently incapable of being reduced to order. At the proper time, however, the globes of a new period are formed and made ready for occupancy as man-bearing worlds. Hither the evolving life is transferred from 5 dark globes, which it traverses during the cosmic night, to commence the activity of a new creative day in an altered environment, prepared and externalized during the activities of the cosmic night. As the forces of fermentation in the fruit stimulate the seed and fertilize the soil in which it grows, so the Lords of the Flame stimulated the germ of divine spirit, particularly during the cosmic night between the Saturn and Sun periods, continuing their activities until the middle of the first revolution of the Sun period. Recapitulation. Before the activity in any period can be started, there is a recapitulation of all that has gone on before. Owing to the spiral path of evolution, this activity takes place each time on a higher scale than the stage in progression which it rehearses. The necessity will become apparent when the actual work in recapitulation is described. The first revolution of any period is a recapitulation of the work done upon the dense body in the Saturn period, and is spoken of among Rosicrucians as the Saturn revolution. The second period is the Sun period, and therefore the second revolution of any period subsequent to the Sun period would be the Sun revolution. The third period is the Moon period, and therefore the third revolution of any subsequent period will be a recapitulation of the work done in the Moon period and is called the Moon revolution. Not until after the recapitulatory revolutions does the proper work of a period begin. For instance, in the present Earth period, we have passed through 3 1/2 revolutions. That means that in the first or Saturn revolution of the Earth period, the work done in the Saturn period was repeated, but on an advanced scale. In the second or Sun revolution, the work of the Sun period was gone through again. In the third or Moon revolution, the work of the Moon period was repeated. And it was only in the fourth, the present revolution, that the real work of the Earth period commenced. In the last of the 7 periods, the Vulcan period, only the last revolution will be concerned with real Vulcan work. In the preceding 6 revolutions, the work of the preceding 6 periods will have been recapitulated. Moreover, and this will particularly help the student to remember, a Saturn revolution in any period has always to do with the development of some new feature of the dense body, because that was started in a first revolution, and any 7th or Vulcan revolution has for its particular work some activity in connection with the divine spirit, because that was started in the 7th revolution. In the same way, we shall see that there is a connection between the different revolutions and all the vehicles of man. The Sun period. Conditions during the Sun period differed radically from those of the Saturn period. Instead of the warmth globes of the latter, the Sun period globes were glowing light balls of the consistency of gas. These great gas balls contained all that had been evolved in the Saturn period, and similarly, in the atmosphere were the creative hierarchies. Instead of the echo-like, reflecting quality of the Saturn period, these globes, to some extent, had the quality of absorbing and working over sight or sound projected against their surfaces. They, as it were, sensed things. The Earth does not seem to do this, and a materialist would scoff at the idea, yet the occultist knows that the Earth feels everything on and in it. This lighter globe was much more sensitive than the Earth because it was not limited and bound in such hard and fast conditions of materiality as is our present habitat. The life, of course, was different because no forms such as we know could have existed there. But life can express itself in forms of fiery gas as well as, in fact better than, in forms of hard chemical matter, such as the present dense forms of mineral, plant, animal and man. As the evolving life appeared upon globe A in the first or Saturn revolution of the Sun period, it was still in charge of the Lords of the Flame, who, in the middle of the last revolution of the Saturn period, awakened in man the germ of the divine spirit. They had previously given the germ of the dense body and, in the first half of the Saturn revolution of the Sun period, were concerned with certain improvements to be made upon it. In the Sun period, the formation of the vital body was to be commenced, with all thereby implied of capability for assimilation, growth, propagation, glands, etc. The Lords of the Flame incorporated in the germ of the dense body only the capability of evolving sense organs. At the time now under consideration, it became necessary to change the germ in such a way as to allow the interpenetration by a vital body, also capable of evolving glands and an alimentary canal. This was done by the joint action of the Lords of the Flame, who gave the original germ, and the Lords of Wisdom, who took charge of material evolution in the Sun period. The Lords of Wisdom, who were not so highly evolved as the Lords of the Flame, worked to complete their own evolution. Therefore, they received the assistance of an order of exalted beings who, like the Lords of the Flame, acted of their own free will. In esoteric parlance, they are called the cherubim. These exalted beings did not, however, become active in the work until it was necessary to awaken the germ of the second spiritual principle of our man in the making, as the Lords of Wisdom were quite capable of doing the work connected with the vital body, which was to be added to the constitution of man in the Sun period, but not of awakening the second spiritual principle. When the Lords of the Flame and the Lords of Wisdom had, in the Saturn revolution of the Sun period, conjointly reconstructed the germinal dense body, the Lords of Wisdom, in the second revolution, started the proper work of the Sun period by radiating from their own bodies the germ of the vital body, making it capable of interpenetrating the dense body and giving to the germ the capability of furthering growth and propagation, and of exciting the sense centres of the dense body and causing it to move. In short, they gave germinally to the vital body all the faculties which it is now unfolding to become a perfect and pliable instrument for the use of the spirit. This work occupied the second, third and fifth revolutions I'll start that again. This work occupied the second, third, fourth and fifth revolutions of the Sun period. In the sixth revolution, the cherubim entered and awakened the germ of the second aspect of the threefold spirit in man, the life spirit. In the seventh and last revolution, the newly awakened germ of the life spirit was linked to the germinal divine spirit, and this was still further worked upon. We remember that in the Saturn period, our consciousness was similar to the trace condition. By the activity of the Sun period, this was modified until it became like the consciousness of a dreamless sleep. Evolution in the Sun period added to the constitution of the evolving embryonic man, the next highest and the next lowest of his present vehicles. As a result of the Saturn period, he possessed a germinal dense body and divine spirit. At the end of the Sun period, he possessed a germinal dense body, vital body, divine spirit, and life spirit, a twofold spirit and a twofold body. We also note that, as the first or Saturn revolution of any period is concerned with work in the dense body, because that was started in the first revolution, so the second or Sun revolution of any period is concerned with improvements on the vital body, because it was started in a second revolution. In like manner, the sixth revolution of any period is dedicated to some work on the life spirit, and any seventh revolution is particularly concerned with matters connected with the divine spirit. In the Saturn period, man in the making went through a mineral stage of existence. That is to say, he had a dense body only in the sense as had the mineral. His consciousness was also similar to that of the present mineral. In the same way, and for analogous reasons, it may be said that in the Sun period, man went through the plant existence. He had a dense body and a vital body as plants have, and his consciousness, like theirs, was that of a dreamless sleep. The student will fully grasp this analogy by referring to diagram 4 in the chapter on the four kingdoms, where the vehicles of consciousness, possessed by mineral, plant, animal and man, are schematically shown with the particular consciousness resulting from their possession in each case. When the Sun period was past, there came another cosmic night of assimilation, together with the subjective activity necessary before the opening of the Moon period, and this was equal in length to the preceding period of objective manifestation. The Moon period. As the chief characteristic feature of the dark Saturn globes was described by the term warmth, and that of the Sun period globes as light or glowing heat, so the chief characteristic feature of the globes of the Moon period may be best described by the term moisture. There was no air such as we know. In the centre was the hot fiery core, and next to that, and consequent upon contact with the cold of outside space, there was dense moisture. By contact with the fiery central core, the dense moisture was changed into hot steam, which rushed outward to cool and sink again towards the centre. Therefore, the occult scientist calls the globes of the Moon period water, and describes the atmosphere of that time as fire fog. That was the scene of the next forward step of the evolving life. The Moon period was that of acquiring the germ of a desire body, and starting the germinal activity of the third aspect of the threefold spirit in man, the human spirit, the ego. In the middle of the seventh revolution of the Sun period, the Lords of Wisdom took charge of the germinal life spirit given by the cherubim in the sixth revolution of the Sun period. They did this for the purpose of linking it to the divine spirit. Their greatest activity in this work was reached in the cosmic night intervening between the sun and moon periods. And in the first dawn of the moon period, as the life wave started upon its new pilgrimage, the Lords of Wisdom reappeared, bearing with them the germinal vehicles of the evolving man. In the first or Saturn revolution of the moon period, they cooperated with the Lords of Individuality, who had special charge of the material evolution of the moon period. Together, they reconstructed the germ of the dense body brought over from the sun period. This germ had unfolded embryonic sense organs, digestive organs, glands, etc., and was interpenetrated by a budding vital body which diffused a certain degree of life into the embryonic dense body. Of course, it wasn't solid and visible as it is now, yet in a crude sort of way it was somewhat organised and is perfectly distinguishable to the trained clairvoyant sight of the competent investigator who searches the memory of nature for scenes in that far-off past. In the moon period, it was necessary to reconstruct the dense body to make it capable of being interpenetrated by a desire body, and also capable of evolving a nervous system, muscle, cartilage, and a rudimentary skeleton. This reconstruction was the work of the Saturn revolution of the moon period. In the second or sun revolution, the vital body was also modified to render it capable of being interpenetrated by a desire body, also of accommodating itself to the nervous system, muscle and skeleton, etc. The Lords of Wisdom, who were the originators of the vital body, also helped the Lords of Individuality with this work. In the third revolution, the proper moon work commenced. The Lords of Individuality radiated from themselves the substance which they helped the unconscious evolving man to appropriate and build into a germinal desire body. They also helped him to incorporate this germinal desire in the compound vital body and the dense body, which he already possessed. This work was carried on all through the third and fourth revolutions of the moon period. And as with the Lords of Wisdom, so with the Lords of Individuality. Though exalted far above man, they worked on and in him to complete their own evolution. While they were capable of dealing with the lower vehicle, they were powerless in regard to the higher. They couldn't give the spiritual impulse necessary to the awakening of the third aspect of the threefold spirit in man. Therefore, another class of beings who were beyond the necessity of evolving in such an evolution as we are passing through, who also worked of their own free will, as did the Lords of the Flame and the Cherubim, they came in during the fifth revolution of the moon period to help man. They are called seraphim. They awakened the germ of the third aspect of the spirit, the human spirit. In the sixth revolution of the moon period, the cherubim reappeared and cooperated with the Lords of Individuality to link the newly acquired germ of the human spirit to life spirit. In the seventh revolution of the moon period, the Lords of the Flame again came to the aid of man, helping the Lords of Individuality to link the human spirit to the divine spirit. Thus the separate ego, the threefold spirit, came into existence. Before the beginning of the Saturn period, the virgin spirits who are now man were in the world of virgin spirits and were all conscious as God in who, not from, they were differentiated. They were not self-conscious, however. The attainment of that faculty is partly the object of evolution, which plunges the virgin spirits into a sea of matter of gradually increasing density, which eventually shuts it from the all-consciousness. Thus, in the Saturn period, the virgin spirits were immersed in the world of divine spirit and encased in the tiniest film of that substance, which they partially penetrated by the help of the Lords of the Flame. In the Sun period, the Virgin Spirit was plunged into the denser world of Life Spirit, and more effectively blinded to the all-consciousness by a second veil of the substance of the world of Life Spirit. Still, by the help of the cherubim, it partially penetrated this second veil also. The feeling of the oneness of all was not lost either, for the world of Life Spirit is still a universal world common to and interpenetrating all the planets of a solar system. In the Moon period, however, the Virgin Spirits take a further dip into the still denser matter of the region of abstract thought, and here take the most opaque of its veils, the human spirit is added. Henceforth, the all-consciousness of the Virgin Spirit is lost. It can no longer penetrate its veils, look outwards and perceive others, so it's forced to turn its consciousness inwards, and there it finds itself as the ego, separated and apart from all others. Thus the Virgin Spirit is encased in a threefold veil, and its outermost veil, the human spirit, effectively blinds it to the oneness of life. It becomes the ego by entertaining the illusion of separateness contracted during involution. Evolution will gradually dissolve the illusion, bringing back the all-consciousness, and self-consciousness will have been added. And thus we see at the close of the Moon period, man possessed a threefold body in varying stages of development, and also the germ of the threefold spirit. He had dense, vital and desire bodies, and divine, life and human spirit. All he lacked was the link to connect them. It has been stated that man passed through the mineral stage in the Saturn period, through the plant stage in the Sun period, and his pilgrimage through the conditions of the Moon period corresponds to the phase of animal existence, for the same reason that the two other similes are applicable. He had the dense, vital and desire bodies as our present animals, and his consciousness was an internal picture consciousness, such as the lower animals have today. This resembles the dream consciousness of man, save that it's perfectly rational, being directed by the group spirit of the animals. The student is again referred to diagram 4 in the chapter on the Four Kingdoms, where this is shown. These moon beings were not so purely germinal as in the previous periods. To the trained clairvoyant, they appear suspended by strings in the atmosphere of the fire fog, as the embryo hangs from the placenta by the umbilical cord. Currents common to all of them, which provided some sort of nourishment, flowed in and out from the atmosphere through those cords. These currents were thus to some extent similar in their function to the blood of the present day. The name blood, as applied to these currents, however, is used merely to suggest an analogy, because of the being of the Moon period possessed nothing like our present red blood, which is one of the very latest acquisitions of man. Towards the end of the Moon period, there was a division of the globe, which was the field of our and other evolutions, which, for the sake of greater simplicity, we have not heretofore mentioned, but with which we shall presently become acquainted. Part of that great globe was crystallized by man on account of his inability to keep the part which he inhabited in the high state of vibration maintained by the other beings there, and as this part became more inert, the centrifugal force of the revolving globe sent it spinning into space, where it began to circle around the glowing fiery central portion. The spiritual reason for the throwing off of such crystallizations is that the highest beings on such a globe require for their evolution the exceedingly rapid vibrations of fire. They are hampered by condensation, although such a condition is necessary to the evolution of other and less advanced beings, because they require lower rates of vibration. Therefore, when part of any globe has been consolidated by a group of evolving beings to the detriment of others, that part is thrown off to exactly the proper distance from the central mass, so that it circles as a satellite around its primary. The heat vibrations which strike it are of the rate and strength suitable to the peculiar needs of the beings evolving upon that satellite. Of course, the law of gravitation accounts quite satisfactorily for the phenomenon from a physical viewpoint. But there is always a deeper cause that yields a more complete explanation, and which we will find if we consider the spiritual side of things. As a physical action is but the visible manifestation of the invisible thought which must precede it, so is the throwing off of a planet from a central sun simply the visible and unavoidable effect of invisible spiritual conditions. The smaller planet, which was thrown off in the moon period, condensed with comparative rapidity and remained in the field of our evolution until the end of that period. It was a moon to the parent planet, circling around it as our moon circles around the earth, but it did not show phases as our moon does. It revolved in such a manner that one half was always light and the other always dark, as is the case with Venus. One of its poles was pointed directly towards the large fiery globe, as one of the poles of Venus points directly towards the sun. On this satellite of the moon period, there were currents which encircled it, as the group spirit currents encircle the earth. The moon beings followed those currents instinctively, from the light to the dark side of this old moon. At certain times of the year, when they were on the light side, a sort of propagation took place. We have the atavistic residue of those moon travels for propagation in the migrations of birds of passage, which to the present day follow the group spirit currents around the earth at certain seasons of the year for identical purposes. Even the honeymoon trips of human beings show that man himself has not yet outgrown the migratory impulse in connection with mating. The moon beings at this stage were also capable of giving utterance to sounds or cries. These were cosmic sounds. The development of the individual came later in the Earth period. At the end of the moon period, once more came the interval of rest, the cosmic night. The divided parts were dissolved and merged in the general chaos, which preceded the reorganization of the globe for the Earth period. The Lords of Wisdom had now evolved so far that they were capable of taking charge as the highest creative hierarchy. They were giving special charge of the divine spirit in man during the Earth period. The Lords of Individuality were also sufficiently advanced to work upon the spirit in man, and the life spirit was therefore put under their charge. Another creative hierarchy had special care of the three germs of the dense, vital and desire bodies as they were evolving. They were the ones who, under the direction of the higher orders, actually did the principal work on these bodies, using the evolving life as a kind of instrument. This hierarchy is called the Lords of Form. They were now evolved so far that they were given charge of the third aspect of the spirit in man, the human spirit, in the coming Earth period. There were 12 great creative hierarchies active in the work of evolution at the commencement of the Saturn period. 2 of these hierarchies did some work to help at the very beginning. No information has been given as to what they did, nor anything about them, except that they helped of their own free will, and then withdrew from limited existence into liberation. 3 more of the creative hierarchies followed them at the beginning of the Earth period: the Lords of the Flame, the Cherubim, and the Seraphim, leaving 7 hierarchies in active service when the Earth period began. The Lords of Mind becoming experts at building bodies of mind stuff, as we are becoming expert at building bodies of chemical matter, and for a similar reason. The region of concrete thought was the densest condition of matter reached during the Saturn period, when they were human, and the chemical region is the densest state to be contacted by our humanity. In the Earth periods, the Lords of Mind reached the creator stage and radiated from themselves into our being the nucleus of material from which we are now seeking to build an organised mind. They are called powers of darkness by Paul because they come from the dark Saturn period and are considered evil on account of their separative tendency appertaining to the plane of reason, as contrasted with the unifying forces of the world of life spirit, the realm of love. The Lords of Mind work with humanity, but not with the 3 lower kingdoms. The archangels became experts at building a body of desire stuff, the densest matter of the Sun period. Therefore, they are able to teach and guide such less evolved beings as man and animal how to mould and use a desire body. The angels are thoroughly experienced in building a vital body, for in the Moon period, when they were human, the ether was the densest condition of matter. On account of this ability, they are properly the teachers of man, animal and plant, with regard to the vital functions, propagation and nutrition, etc. Okay, there's a great deal of information in that chapter. I think it perhaps warrants a second or third reading or listening to. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you at chapter 9.